Colorado wind and fire, from brush burning near Red Rocks to wind strong enough to flip vehicles, and a large fire burning up in the high country. A Christian school closes for the day, suggesting without evidence that LGBTQ people plan violence up and down the I-25 corridor.
What we're being told is basically anything in their path they're going to destroy.
Law enforcement says there is no such credible threat. We'll ask Democratic Congressman Jason Crow if there is an issue with prosecutors reaching to indict former President Donald Trump.
This is the process. This is what happens in America.
Migrants are stopped up waiting at the southern border. We look at what the situation there means for arrivals in Denver a few months from now. Tonight on Next. On a day this dry, sparks become fires, and on a day this windy, fires become uncontrollable fast. Firefighters have been out in hurricane-force wind gusts in places trying to keep today's small fires from becoming the kind of fire that we'll remember by name. Let's make the rounds and see what they've been dealing with. So out near Red Rocks, there's a brush fire that's been burning for a few hours. West Metro said it was 10 acres at last check, but is likely larger than that, as their concern has been knocking it down in the strong winds, more so than measuring its spread. So that fire's near I-70 and 470 between Golden and Morrison. At this point, no mandatory evacuations, but Jeffco and Lakewood police have told people living nearby they need to be ready to go. Inside that pre-evacuation area is the Solterra neighborhood in Lakewood. Our Jennifer Meckles is out there in that kind of wind, Jenny, that can take you off your feet at times.
Yeah, I'm thinking you can probably hear it just blowing through the microphones that we're using right now, how strong it's been. It's been like this all afternoon, Kyle. Hard to stand up straight. Your car is wobbling. And really what we're seeing it doing is with the smoke up here on the ridge. I'll get out of the way. You can see it. We'll zoom in and show you. There's kind of 2 points right now where you can see smoke. This has moved a little bit south along the ridge throughout the afternoon, but right now it's kind of concentrated. You see in those 2 spots right there. So we know the fire, according to firefighters, started on that west side of the ridge. We're on the east side of the ridge. For people who are trying to get our location, think 470 in Alameda. If you were driving down 470 today, this is what you were looking at. And West Metro Fire actually just tweeted right before your show started that they've got fire crews running hose up that ridge to try to get water to the top of the ridge. They've been monitoring hot spots. The wind, certainly a huge story today for what that means as far as the threat of fire spreading, but also blowing dust, the possibility that could like send embers into the air. That wind has been just no joke. A lot of people have been pulling over to the side of these service roads to watch this today. We caught up with a couple of them.
It's crazy, like half that mountain's on fire right now, and the wind's probably not helping at all, probably helping spread it a lot.
Yeah, I was gonna head up to Vail, but this is terrifying, and it would take like 3 hours to get to Vail from here, so, and I wanted to watch the fire, so it's pretty cool. It's pretty crazy and kind of scary, so.
Yeah, a little cool, a little scary. That's what we're hearing from a lot of people. But realistically, we know there are homes that are under these pre-evacuation orders tonight. That's more scary than cool. I talked to somebody, actually, we know somebody who lives in the Solterra neighborhood over here. They've got bags packed, ready to leave if they need to. But we are separated from that neighborhood by a road. One last thing I want to mention, Kyle, Red Rocks had a show scheduled for tonight. An artist known by Dabin was supposed to have a concert. That has now been canceled. That area is under pre-evacuation warning. They said, you know what, it's not worth doing a show tonight. So it's not happening.
Yeah, no place for a show. Jennifer Meckles, thank you. Jump back in if anything changes. Firefighters in Park and Teller counties are still trying to get a handle on what they're calling the 403 fire burning near Lake George. It started yesterday, not contained at this point, but firefighters think they might get it tonight. It's burned about 1,200 acres, a bit less than 2 square miles. No buildings have been lost at this point. There are about 100 homes evacuated over the course of the firefight. It started burning through dry grass, then slowed down when it reached heavy timber. Firefighters are trying to keep it from getting back into open grassy areas where it might be able to run.
Definitely a day that we're at the mercy of Mother Nature. Good news is these winds should be backing off quite a bit within the next 2 hours or so, only to pick back up again as we look ahead toward tomorrow afternoon up in the foothills. We will get a break here in the metro area, but not the case today. Rocky Flats recording a 90-mile-per-hour wind gust earlier this afternoon. 80-plus mile-per-hour speeds around Arvada, Broomfield, Boulder, much of the same, with 50 to 60-mile-per-hour winds just charging across the Denver metro area. They're still quite strong at the 6 o'clock hour. 46-mile-per-hour mile-per-hour speeds around Broomfield, all coming our way out of the northwest. You can see across the eastern plains 40, 50 mile-per-hour wind speeds, and again, a couple more hours to go. The red flag warning should expire at 7 o'clock tonight for the Denver area. However, it will go back into effect for much of southern Colorado tomorrow, where we are going to be tracking winds out of the west, 15 to 25 miles per hour, wind gusts upwards of 35. This is what I'm talking about. Late tonight, these winds start to lay down here for the urban corridor. Unfortunately, not the case up in the foothills. They will go strong throughout the night and even into tomorrow afternoon. Futurecast still kicking up a little bit of snowfall up in the high country, some blowing and drifting snow. That's been an issue. As the storm system pushes off to the east and parts of the Midwest, we're looking at a tornado watch. We already saw a devastating tornado push through parts of Little Rock earlier this afternoon. A lot of injuries out there. High pressure, though, zooms back into Colorado for the weekend. That means our temperatures are going to be warming up. We're back to the 60s, low 70s here for eastern Colorado, and we are looking at, yet again, another storm pushing in on Tuesday with a bit more snow and cooler temperatures next week.
Thank you, Danielle. Today is Trans Day of Visibility, the annual day dedicated to celebrating the transgender community and raising awareness of the discrimination they face. As if to prove their point, at least 4 Christian schools in northern Colorado closed today, some telling parents they were worried about a threat from the LGBTQ community. Law enforcement in northern Colorado says there is no such credible threat. Unlike countless other precautionary school closures for this unconfirmed threat or that unconfirmed threat, these closure announcements singled out a group of people as the potential threat, the LGBTQ community. And they did so without providing any evidence. Listen to the head of Resurrection Christian School in Loveland telling parents in a video last night that there's essentially going to be some kind of like gay rampage up I-25 today.
So what we've been told is that tomorrow is a day of rage by that community, and that they are going to be sweeping up the I-25 corridor and headed to Fort Collins. Ultimately. However, what we're being told is basically anything in their path they're going to destroy, and they are specifically targeting Christian entities and Christian organizations.
Again, the school has provided no evidence that that is true, and it's not difficult to see how these kinds of claims by Resurrection Christian School and others could be dangerous to people in the LGBTQ community. Resurrection Christian School said that law enforcement told the school that Christian organizations would be targeted today. We talked to law enforcement agencies across northern Colorado, and not one agency says that they've told anybody that. In fact, the Fort Collins police chief made a video trying to knock down the chatter that was being sourced back to some unnamed law enforcement agency.
I want to let our community know that we have heard a variety of concerns and rumors about national issues and how they're going to manifest here locally. I want to let you know that we've had a team of detectives look into each and every one of those rumors, and we have found there is no credibility. Nothing for us to report to our community.
Tonight, the head of Resurrection Christian School told me that his claims about LGBTQ people coming up I-25, destroying anything in their path, did not actually come from law enforcement. He wouldn't say where he got it. And he said that our reporting about his claim now makes his school a target. Democratic Congressman Jason Crow helped to lead one of former President Donald Trump's impeachment trials. And Crow says that Trump, like anyone else, deserves the presumption of innocence now that he's been indicted. Congressman Crow, I see some Democrats celebrating the indictment of former President Donald Trump. Is that something to celebrate?
No, it's not. Nobody should be celebrating, and nobody should be vilifying this. This is the process. This is what happens in America. Everyone's accountable to the law. If they break it, then they have to answer for that. And we're going to see what happens.
In a moment, extended next conversation with Congressman Crow about whether prosecutors are overreaching to try and just get Trump on something, and whether Crow thinks that this might lead to conservative prosecutors indicting Democrats on flimsy charges. Your Word of Thanks microgiving this week is delivering meals to neighbors around the metro area, especially in immigrant and refugee communities. Kaizen Food Rescue makes sure that food does not go to waste. That is part of their deal, and instead they make sure that it gets to communities that need it. And the nonprofit builds community for people who might not always feel at home here at first, through dinners and events, along with their pop-up food pantries around the metro area. And they're also building gardens and tiny farms that community members can then raise produce in themselves. Scan the QR code on your screen or text the word thanks to 303-871-1491 to join me and a bunch of other folks in donating to Kaizen Food Rescue. We continue our conversation with Congressman Jason Crow, and I ask about the potential for retaliation after the indictment of Donald Trump.
We're seeing a huge mass of people just kind of bottlenecked at the border.
We've seen a slowdown of migrants coming to Colorado. Immigration attorneys say a backup at the border is causing desperation. Next. Our next conversation tonight is with a Colorado Democrat who tried unsuccessfully to get Donald Trump convicted by the U.S. Senate. Now, Congressman and impeachment manager Jason Crow is urging his fellow Democrats not to celebrate the former president's criminal indictment and to let the process play out in the justice system.
I don't know whether Donald Trump broke the law or not. The indictment hasn't been unsealed. We haven't seen the indictment. Grand jury proceedings are closed. We have to see how this process plays out.
It's true, none of us have seen this indictment, but from what has been reported, it's cobbled together with a fairly unprecedented kind of charge. The fact that this kind of case is being brought against a former president, does it run the risk of looking like prosecutors are trying to go after him on anything, even if they have to invent it?
Well, you know, above most courthouses is the statue of justice. And justice is holding the scales, and justice is actually blindfolded. And the reason that justice is blindfolded is because it shouldn't matter what your job is, what your gender is, where you live, what your title is. In America, you are subject to the law, whether you're a former president or anybody else for that matter.
For all of the Republican protestations about the idea that prosecutions are now being politicized, of course, a foundational idea of the Trump era were threats to imprison his political opponents for this or that. It was literally a chant at his rallies. Do you think the fact that now he is on the receiving end of an indictment makes it more likely that his allies somewhere else in America, some conservative prosecutor somewhere, is going to bring a spurious case against a Democrat?
Well, it shouldn't. I don't know whether it makes it more likely or not. But listen, Donald Trump has a long history, a well-established history of inciting violence, of actually calling for physical violence against his opponents, calling for imprisonment against his opponents. This is a man who fundamentally doesn't agree with American democracy and our system of checks and balances. And his core supporters around him have enabled that, or in worst cases actually have furthered that and perpetuated that violence and that lack of respect for rule of law. So he remains very dangerous. Some of the core people around him remain very dangerous, and that's why we have to be vigilant.
My full conversation with Representative Jason Crow is available on the Next YouTube channel and on 9news.com. Denver voters have until Tuesday to turn in their ballot. I voted, felt awesome. They give you a sticker. You actually get to keep the sticker either way, but don't wear it if you don't vote. So I've been covering the mayor's race. We've been talking ballot issues, and even I was looking at the thing like, I have last-minute questions and hesitations. So let's make the deal that we do every time before Election Day. If you are holding onto a ballot and might not vote because you have some lingering question, the next team will answer it for you. We'll do it privately by email, as long as you then promise to vote. Maybe it's about a position of one of the 16 candidates for Denver mayor, or it's a question about that Park Hill golf course development. Email your question to us. We will hustle to get you the best answer that we can, citing sources, as long as you then promise to vote by Tuesday. Email those questions to next@9news.com. Fewer migrants have been crossing the U.S.-Mexico border.
People are desperate. People have fled for their lives and are doing anything in their power to just try and seek refuge.
An immigration attorney says that adds to the problems that migrants face, as some of them try to reach Denver in search of a better life. Next. Migrant arrivals in Denver have slowed. Today, the city closed a temporary shelter at the McNichols building. There's calm here, but there's some chaos at the border. On Monday, there was a fire that killed 39 migrants at a detention facility in Juarez, Mexico, after a protest got out of control. Our Angeline McCall talked with an immigration attorney about what's happening right now.
Just across the U.S.-Mexico border, migrants hope the journey they made will pay off.
What we're seeing is people becoming more and more desperate.
Desperation to come to the United States and to stay here is something immigration attorney Laura Lunn sees daily.
We're seeing a huge logjam of people just waiting at the border, being placed in all kinds of vulnerable positions.
This week, migrants set mattresses on fire at a Mexican detention facility after reportedly learning they were about to be deported. The fire killed 39 people.
People have fled for their lives and are doing anything in their power to just try and seek refuge. And so being placed in a detention facility with pending deportation back to government regimes that they're fearful will take their lives, makes people do wild things that, you know, seem just completely outside of the scope of what a normal person would do.
In Mexico, mourning over the lives lost and anger over the surveillance video showing the guards walking away.
Pésimo. No devuelven, no quitan dinero. Es horrible. Yo digo que mejor es la selva. Que todo el mundo dice que la selva, que el peligro, pero la verdad el infierno ha sido la migración mexicana.
Danger is what they left, only to face it again.
Well, I think that this incident really highlights the fact that U.S. policy is creating these huge bottlenecks of people who are not able to cross the border, and they've been put in wildly dangerous positions.
Without a policy change, Lund worries problems at the border will continue, especially with potential for more people to arrive.
You heard her there mention that there are different policies that she believes are creating this bottleneck, with those policies being Title 42, which is expected to be lifted in May. And the Biden administration recently announced that it will not grant asylum to migrants unless they have sought asylum in another country prior to arriving, which could dramatically change what we're seeing at the border and in turn what we're seeing here in Denver as well in the upcoming months. But not to mention, weather is a big factor for when people finally make that decision to make the journey.
And Angelina, I just think that there are going to be friends and family members, acquaintances of the people that you've introduced us to who have already made it to Denver, who are further kind of back along in the chain and just haven't gotten here yet.
Oh, absolutely. You have to think this is a journey that takes 3 to 4 months. So there are people that are still on that journey who want to be reunited with friends, with family, with relatives, who it might be, who is here in Denver. And so at that point, you have to think, right, they're somewhere on the journey. They're going to make it here some way. And something that Laura Lunn and I talked about is that you think about these policies. And while we may think that they are deterrents, the reality is that if someone wants to be here, they are going to try to be here, and that's why you're seeing an uptick as well in illegal migrant crossings.
Yeah, we've seen just how strong the pull is. Angeline, thank you. We're back with your feedback and a word about one of our competitors next. You didn't think you could get out of here without our favorite Friday tradition, your good news, did you? Kiki told us that they are finally able to buy a place in the metro. They move in next week. Heidi survived her first week back in the classroom after spring break. And Makia told us our little bit of good news is after all the hurdles and fights, high points, low points, we're getting closer and closer to moving back home to Sagamore after the Marshall Fire. Former 9 News colleague who spent most of his career here in town across the street at CBS 4 retires tonight. Jim Beneman is just a class act. Perhaps you remember him from his time on 9 News years ago. Perhaps you stray from watching Next time to time and you watch him over on CBS 4. He basically looks the same, which, you know, good for him, because these photos are from some years ago. I will say this, Jim Beneman and I never worked together here at 9 News. I've only run into him around town at a couple of occasions, but I can tell you, even in those brief interactions, you can see the reason that people describe him as just one of the most kind and gracious guys around. Really funny as well. And a journalist who is uncompromising about the truth, even when it's unpopular. That's why I'm a fan of his.